Following Israel's airstrike on their ballistic missile production facilities, the Iranian leadership seems determined to stay on a collision course against Israel, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei making a fiery speech promising revenge. In Lebanon, the IDF is making rapid progress in clearing Hezbollah positions near the border and has already moved up to the second line of villages further north. The fighting is difficult and the IDF has taken casualties, but the threat is being degraded, and now there are reports of massive desertions of Hezbollah fighters that are no longer willing to fight for the organization. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Hamas is humiliated and beaten, with a few remaining survivors beginning to ask how they can survive without most of the rockets, weapons, leaders, and terrorists. Elsewhere, the chief of the Mossad takes off to a summit in Doha, Qatar, aimed at securing the release of the remaining hostages, while Hamas claims that they will release all the remaining hostages in exchange for the end of the war and withdrawal from Gaza. In international news, Karim Khan, the prosecutor who is trying to charge Israeli leaders with war crimes at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, has been accused in a wide-ranging sexual harassment scandal that will likely lead to further delays in this case. We have a lot to discuss today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your boots-on-the-ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 388th day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, all of whom are acting under the auspices of Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A second before we start, please find the subscribe button and press on it so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. 3 Iranian officials told the New York Times in the last 24 hours that the destruction of air defense systems by Israel during Saturday's attack caused deep concern in Iran. This is because vital energy and economic centers are now exposed to future attacks, and the officials fear that if Iran retaliates from this strike, Israel will use that as a pretext for a much larger strike. Meanwhile, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has made statements indicating that he does not believe Israel understands his country and is making bad decisions based on incorrect assumptions about Iranian culture. He has also expressed a desire to teach Israelis the reality of the situation that they are not currently seeing. Perhaps for this reason, he has set up an account on X in Hebrew and began posting messages there, which he appears to think that Israelis will be very interested in reading. However, after just 2 posts, the account was suspended by X early Monday morning. The 2 posts said, and I quote, "In the name of Allah, the merciful and merciful." And the second, "The Zionist regime made a mistake, and they made a mistake in their calculation regarding Iran. We will make them understand what power, ability, initiative, and desire the Iranian nation has." But that was just an X. In the real world, Khamenei also threatened Israel in a speech he made in Persian, saying the miscalculation of the Zionist regime must be resolved. They must understand the strength and desire and the initiative of the Iranian nation and the country's youth. Israel made a mistake in its calculations, and it must understand the will of the Iranian people. Israel's steps should not be exaggerated or underestimated. To make a brief comment on all of this, I believe there is someone in this conversation who doesn't understand who is dealing with, but it's not Israel. Furthermore, Khamenei's attempt to speak for the Iranian people, especially the youth, who his regime has brutalized and oppressed for over 40 years now, is particularly disgusting. In the last 20 years, the regime he leads has massacred thousands of Iranian people, including many young people whose only crime was not wanting to live under his theocratic tyranny. In any case, he does not sound like a man who has a firm grasp on reality, and sadly, it is likely that Israel will have to continue communicating with him in the only language he might understand. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on what is happening in the sector of this war against Iran. But before we continue, I want to invite you to visit our website at www.tbnisrael.com. Shifting our focus to the battle against Hezbollah, the IDF's ground operation is approaching 1 month of ground maneuvers beyond the border fence, and the fighting is beginning to intensify as Hezbollah recovers from the initial shock and begins to regroup and reorganize. The IDF has begun to take heavier casualties than earlier in the battle, and one emerging threat is snipers. There were few of them at the beginning, but there are more now, and they're taking a toll. This has required the IDF to alter their tactical arrangements and patterns, but there are time-tested methods for dealing with snipers and many other battlefield hazards, and the IDF is well-trained and prepared for these contingencies. Progress is being made, and the proof of this comes from the IDF's operational maneuvers in the second line of villages north of the border with Israel. Many of the Hezbollah positions in these villages have been abandoned, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But the IDF is finding staggering amounts of weapons and ammunition in these places, including brand new state-of-the-art Russian-manufactured rockets, guns, grenades, mortars, and anti-tank missiles. The amount of equipment being captured has led the IDF's High Command to reevaluate the scope of the mission, saying it might need to extend the operation beyond what was originally planned. The initial plan, which was presented to the Israeli public and also promised to the Americans, spoke of a targeted and limited ground operation to remove the threat of invasion from the north near the border only. In this belt of 1 to 3 kilometers north of the Israeli border, which stretches over 130 kilometers between the Mediterranean Sea and the eastern border of Israel, there are about 15 to 20 of these small villages. Another 50 or so villages are situated slightly north of this belt, and beyond that, there are many larger towns. These are not small villages, and it will be much more complicated for the IDF if it has to enter these communities. It will also likely require the Northern Command to consult and receive permission from the General Staff and the political level to expand these divisional operations beyond the startup villages along the line of conflict. However, in the immediate future, the sweeps of these border villages continues, and in recent days, the Northern Nachal Reserve Brigade 228 located large stocks of weapons and ammunition originally belonging to the IDF in the village of Hazanka, just north of the Galilee. This is just one small part of what the IDF estimates was a vast arsenal placed in these border villages so that it will be available to Hezbollah when they felt the time was right to invade northern Israel. It is not clear how these IDF weapons and ammunition ended up in a Hezbollah warehouse, and an investigation has begun. It should be remembered that Israel deployed forces to a buffer zone in southern Lebanon for many years following the First Lebanon War in early 1980s. The IDF fully withdrew in the year of 2000, and there were reports that some equipment that the IDF has given to its South Lebanese army allies was captured by Hezbollah. IDF troops recaptured some of this equipment already back in 2006 during the Second Lebanon War, and these stocks probably came from the same source. In any case, despite the heavy losses in recent days, the IDF soldiers in the field continue to gain achievements. Let me tell you a little bit about the fighting. For starters, the terrain is very different from what the IDF encountered in the Gaza Strip, and so are the tactics that the IDF uses. Tanks and heavy bulldozers, which are usually at the head of any column of infantry in the Gaza Strip, are rarely used in Lebanon. This is also because the IDF knows that Hezbollah has advanced Russian-built anti-tank missiles, unlike Hamas. In Lebanon, the infantry is out in the front, negating the anti-tank missiles that Hezbollah has and also making it easier to detect booby traps and tunnels. The IDF also has the advantage of using 3D mapping technologies issued by the 9,900 unit of military intelligence. As a footnote, IDF troops also need to deal with a new source of ammunition, and that is the Hezbollah stockpiles that they encountered. As much of it as possible is brought back to Israel, but because there is so much of it, and because it is sometimes dangerous to move, it is destroyed on location. And this is done inside the Hezbollah bunkers and tunnels, often using the explosives that the IDF finds there in order to destroy the tunnels of Hezbollah. This saves the IDF a great deal of time and money, and it is also safer for the IDF troops. Even with these advantages, it is a difficult, dangerous, and very time-consuming task for the IDF to go house to house, bunker to bunker, tunnel to tunnel, and clear out all the weapons and ammunitions, terrorist fighters, and military equipment that Hezbollah placed in these areas to use against the Israeli civilians. Hezbollah took years to set up everything to invade the Galilee, and it won't be undone in a few weeks only. The IDF learned in the Gaza Strip that it takes time to clear a threat from the borders, and many lessons learned in Gaza are being put to good use in Lebanon. Hezbollah is also learning lessons from what's going on, and for many of its fighters, the lesson that they seem to be learning is that it's time to quit. There are many reports of desertions, and to these reports, I will add that most of the positions that the IDF troops find are abandoned. There have also been a few Hezbollah fighters who surrendered and quickly told the IDF everything they knew. Other fighters who were deployed to positions along the border have simply disappeared, refusing to answer attempts by their superior officers to contact them. Others are refusing to report for duty when called, and reports on Arab media outlets say that many of them have fled Lebanon entirely, taking their families and joining the masses of refugees flooding into Syria and elsewhere. Hezbollah is also reported to be unable to recruit new members to replace those that have been lost. Some fresh Hezbollah fighters are also arriving at the southern front to replace those who have run away or been eliminated by the IDF. But the organization is beginning to show serious cracks and may soon fall apart altogether. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on what is happening in the northern sector. But before we continue, I need to tell you about an unfortunate incident that happened yesterday that illustrates the complicated Israeli reality. Although we are having great successes on the battlefields, we are also still vulnerable to a very old problem, and that's terrorism in our cities. On Sunday morning, a large truck plowed into a bus stop in the Glilot suburb of northern Tel Aviv, an Israeli city. Several people had just gotten off the bus at this stop, including many retirees, who were on an organized trip to a museum in the area. The driver of the truck was later identified as Rami Nasrallah, a resident of the Israeli Arab village of Kalanswa. He had a criminal record and was known to the police, while his family said that he has been suffering from a heart disease recently. In any case, shortly after plowing his truck into a bus stop and injuring 33 people, he was neutralized by an armed Israeli civilian, putting a stop to this attack. Police spokesman Yair Doron said that the police are treating this incident as a nationalistic attack, but in an official statement, it was stated that the circumstances of this incident are being investigated. Senior medic for the Magen David Adom fire responders team, Elior Yosef, said, "We arrived at the scene and saw a scene where a truck collided with people at a bus stop. This is a very difficult incident, but we acted quickly in order to provide the injured with the best medical care. This is a good place to tell you that Magen David Adom is the sponsor for today's video, and I'm very proud that they chose to work with us." Magen David Adom is an organization that goes everywhere in Israel to save lives in any situation, including terrorist attacks, work accidents, car accidents, heart attacks, and also unhappy occasions such as when a new baby is being ready to be born. Every Israeli, whether they're Jewish or Arab, knows that when they're hurt, sick, injured, or otherwise in need, Magen David Adom will be there to take care of them. Most of Magen David Adom's 35,000 workers are volunteers, and they rely entirely on donations to continue functioning. If you want to help them, you can make a donation by visiting their website at www.savelifeisrael.com. Now back to the news, and we're switching our focus to the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, the IDF attacked terrorists who were operating in a command and control complex that was established in the area that was previously used as the Asma school in the northern Gaza Strip. This incident is one of many that raises the question of what is happening now in Gaza, as the fighting has continued at a lower level than what had been normal for the most of the past year. No ceasefire has officially been declared, even after the elimination of Yahya Sinwar. However, in practice, IDF operations in most parts of the Gaza Strip have concluded. This is not unexpected. In fact, this is the logical conclusion of what had been planned. This is, as the IDF says, Phase 3 of Operation Swords of Iron. Large-scale operations have already been wrapped up in most parts of the Gaza Strip, and the IDF is now mostly deployed in the vicinity of the Philadelphia corridor and the neighborhoods adjacent to it in Rafah to prevent Hamas from beginning to resupply themselves through smuggling tunnels. Other units are also deployed in the Netzer corridor that separates the northern Gaza Strip from the rest of its territory. From these 2 points, the forces launched targeted raids such as those currently taking place in Jabalia and Bet Lahia. The IDF is well prepared for this prolonged stay in the Gaza Strip. There are outposts already established in the Netzer corridor. There are operational roads paved by the IDF there and in the Philadelphia corridor. The IDF already understands that fighting in Gaza will go in cycles. The houses where the forces are now fighting in Jabalia and its refugee camps are the same houses that the forces of the 98th Division operated and cleared in May, and the forces of the 162nd Division also did this at the height of the maneuver in November and December of 2023. Hamas has managed to regroup and re-establish itself in some areas, and the IDF will have to continue putting pressure on them. For instance, in Rafah, the IDF is still raiding targets where Hamas is trying to operate again or where its capabilities still remain, mainly underground. But these raids are mainly local and are intended to maintain control of the nearby Philadelphia corridor. The IDF, for more than half a year, has not deployed in most of the land in the Gaza Strip. In a large city like Khan Yunis, for example, there are obvious signs of Hamas recovery, even more than in the north of the Gaza Strip. Israel is paying a maintenance tax to the Americans in the form of bringing in electricity, fuel, medicines, and food for Gaza, and these quickly pass into the hands of Hamas, or even worse, to the armed gangs who answer to no one, not even Hamas. In fact, in such places, the voices of residents opposed to Hamas have been heard more than once, saying that it is already better for them to return, since under Hamas, at least, there was law and order, and now it's scary to walk around in the streets. However, Hamas as a terrorist army has been mortally wounded. According to the estimates, between 80 to 90% of its medium and long-range rockets have been destroyed. The IDF estimates that it removed approximately 15 to 20,000 registered Hamas terrorists from the battlefield, out of the approximately 30,000 that the organization claimed to have on October 6th. Despite the massive blow it has received, Hamas continues to recruit young fighters, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group also has large numbers of fighters it can still deploy. Even after Sinwar's elimination, Hamas still has senior commanders in Gaza, such as Brigadier General Rafiah Mohammed Shabana, who is in charge of the northern part of the Gaza Strip. There is also Azadin El-Hamed, or the brother of Sinwar, Muhammad, in addition to the leadership of Hamas abroad. Hamas also still holds several dozen Israelis hostages. However, there are also hostages who are not held by Hamas, but by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or other armed terrorists. Therefore, despite the opportunities supposedly created with the assassination of the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, there are new challenges in negotiations. Hamas officials spoke with the Arab channel El Sharak El Akbar in recent days, presenting the outline that they intend to propose in the negotiations in Qatar. According to the report, it will include the release of all the remaining hostages in exchange for the release of terrorists held in Israeli prisons, as well as the full withdrawal of all IDF forces from the Gaza Strip. This is a comprehensive agreement to end the war in the Gaza Strip, which comes shortly after the assassination of the main murderer, Yair Sinwar, who continued to vehemently refuse any outline that was offered. One Hamas official said, "Today, the Egyptian, Qatari, and the American mediators are meeting with the Israeli negotiator and will listen to their proposals, but we, for our part, prefer a comprehensive deal that will take place in one step that ends the war once and for all, in exchange for a prisoner exchange process." Also, senior Hamas officials emphasized to the Arab Channel that they will not accept any deal that does not include the end of the war, and repeated their words that they would also refuse any Israeli proposal that includes the expulsion of the terrorist organization's leaders from the Gaza Strip. The head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, has landed in the Qatari capital, Doha, and began talks with the head of the CIA, William Burns, and the Prime Minister of Qatar, Mohammed El Thani. The meeting between them is the first in 2 months, and its purpose is to start the negotiating talks and hold an initial dialogue to examine the initiatives and proposals on the agenda for the release of the abductees. The intention is to promote a new outline which will also take into account the latest Egyptian proposal and will soon lead to the resumption of talks by the negotiating teams. The possibility of a four-way summit in the coming days with the mediators and with the participation of Hamas is not ruled out. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on what is happening in the Gaza Strip, and we ask you to continue help us spreading the truth. You can do that by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Take a minute to press the subscribe button so that together we can give the truth its rightful place. Speaking of the truth coming to light, our next story is about Karim Khan, the senior prosecutor at the International Criminal Court at The Hague, who has been pursuing arrest warrants for Israeli leaders on war crimes charges over the past year. Now, it is being revealed that this man is being accused of gross sexual misconduct, trying to force himself on a young woman who worked in his office. A young female lawyer has accused him of several indecent acts over the course of the past year, and he also tried to silence her when she attempted to complain about him. It was revealed in The Guardian that the senior lawyer used his associates to exert heavy psychological pressure on her, to the extent that one of his associates asked her to write a letter in which she would deny any connection with him, which was supposed to return things to normal. Khan is strongly denying the accusations and claims that this is a deliberate political smear campaign, hinting at the involvement of rivals and even of Israel. However, all the estimates about Israel's involvement in the affair were initially raised by sources close to Khan himself, but in an in-depth investigation by the Guardian news portal, this possibility was ruled out. The newspaper states that the investigation showed that there is no connection between Israel and the accusations against Khan. In addition, sources familiar with the details of the investigation claim that the decisions regarding the arrest warrants against the senior Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, were made at an earlier date, long before the complaints about Khan's conduct surfaced and began to spread. The speculations presented in the Wall Street Journal, according to which Khan sought the arrest warrants in order to divert attention from the affair, were also found to be incorrect by sources who are closely familiar with the chain of events. All the evidence indicates that the affair developed within the court itself, and it is not related at all to external factors, certainly not to Israel. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on these developments going forward. Once again, we ask you to help us spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. I would like to conclude by paying my respects to some of the heroes who have fallen recently in the defense of the State of Israel. Sergeant Hillel Eliyahu Ovadia, 22, from Jerusalem, a trainee in the Tank Commander's course in the 196th Battalion, Bnei Or Formation, 460, was killed on Friday morning along with Captain Barak Israel, 22 years of age, a lieutenant from Petah Tikva, and Sergeant Ido Ben-Tzvi, 21 years of age, who died from an explosive device. Acting Major Dan Maori, 43 years of age, from Beit Yitzchak Sha'ar Hafer, deputy commander of the 89th Battalion, was killed last Thursday along with 4 other reservists from the Chazan Armored Brigade. 8 from the missile that was exploded near a building in the central sector of South Lebanon. Along with him fell a captain in the reserves, Alon Safari, 28 years of age from Jerusalem, a senior sergeant in the reserve, Omri Lotan, 47 years of age from Bet Hefer, a senior sergeant in the reserves, Guy Idan, 51 years of age from Mishamat, and first sergeant in the reserves, Tom Segal, 28 years of age. Guys, I would like to ask you to pray for the families of those fallen soldiers. Pray for the people of Israel. Pray for the soldiers of the IDF wherever they are, in the air, at the sea, and on the land. Pray for the safe return of the hostages home from the Gaza Strip. Pray for the safe return of the residents of the north also to return to their houses. And most importantly, unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.